During a late-night bar visit, I fell into the arms of a stranger who whispered, "Tonight's ours and ours alone." I said, "This can't ever happen again." The next morning, he smiled. "Then why did you kiss me goodbye twice?" My best friend asked, "Why are you so quiet today?" I realized my one-night stand was a secret too big to hide forever. I wasn't the type to do this. I wasn't reckless. I wasn't the woman who threw her life away for a moment of weakness. But that night was different. It started with a simple text from Amanda. "Drinks tonight. You need this." I should have said no. I should have stayed home, curled up on the couch with my husband, Brian, like I always did. But lately, home didn't feel as warm. Lately, Brian had been distant. So I told myself one drink wouldn't hurt. One night out with Amanda, laughing over margaritas, would be harmless. O'Malley's was buzzing with life when we walked in. The smell of cheap beer and stale wood filled the air. A guy in the corner played guitar, off-key but trying. The low hum of conversation, the occasional burst of laughter, it all felt so normal. But it didn't take long for me to notice him. He was across the bar alone, swirling the ice in his glass. He wasn't loud, wasn't trying to get attention. Just sitting there, watching, waiting. Our eyes met. A slow, deliberate lock. I should have looked away. I should have turned back to Amanda, forced myself to focus on the safe and familiar. Instead, I held his gaze. And he smirked. Not in an arrogant way. Not like he was sizing me up. It was a knowing smirk. Like he already knew how this night was going to end. Like he knew me. I swallowed hard and looked away. Amanda was mid-story about her coworker's latest drama, but I wasn't listening. I sipped my drink, but my hand was unsteady. And when I glanced back at him, he was still watching. Still waiting. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was the drinks. Maybe it was the months of loneliness pressing against my ribs. Maybe it was the tiny, dangerous part of me that wanted to feel seen. Whatever it was, I did something I never thought I'd do. I excused myself from Amanda, weaving through the crowd, heart pounding. And then I was standing in front of him. "Do I know you?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. His lips curled into that same smirk. "Not yet." It was a line. A stupid, predictable line. And I should have laughed it off, should have walked away. But I didn't. Because the way he said it? It wasn't just a line. It was a promise. He motioned to the empty stool beside him. I hesitated. And then I sat down. The next few hours passed in a blur of conversation and whiskey. His name was Daniel. He was from New York, in town for business. He asked about my life, my work, my favorite books. And I told him. Things I hadn't said out loud in years. Brian never asked me about books anymore. Never asked me about anything that wasn't practical, bills, groceries, whether I remembered to call the plumber. We weren't unhappy, not really. We were just existing. And Daniel? He was listening. Hanging on every word like I was the most interesting person in the world. At some point, Amanda texted me. "Leaving soon. You good?" I should have left with her. I should have finished my drink, said goodnight, and walked away. Instead, I typed back, "Yeah. I'll get an Uber." Daniel raised an eyebrow. He saw my hesitation. "You don't have to stay," he said. "But I won't stop you." And I stayed. I don't know who leaned in first. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was inevitable. But suddenly, I was close enough to see the flecks of green in his brown eyes. Close enough to feel his breath on my cheek. Close enough that the noise of the bar faded into nothing. Then he whispered, "Tonight's ours. And ours alone." My heart stopped. I could have left. Right then, right there. I could have laughed it off, paid my tab, gone home to my husband like a good wife. But I didn't. I let him kiss me. And I kissed him back. Somewhere in the back of my mind, a voice was screaming at me. "This is wrong. This is dangerous. This isn't you." But my body had other plans. And when we stumbled out of the bar together, when his hand found the small of my back, when we slipped into a cab and he told the driver the name of his hotel, I didn't protest. Because for the first time in years, I felt wanted. I felt alive. And I didn't want the night to end. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the hotel room's curtains. My head pounded, but that wasn't what made my stomach twist. Daniel stirred beside me, stretching with a lazy smile. "Morning." I swallowed hard. This can't happen again. He studied me for a moment. Then he grinned. "Then why did you kiss me goodbye twice?" I felt sick. I couldn't remember. Had I? Had I really? I needed to go. I needed to leave. I scrambled for my clothes, ignoring the warmth of his gaze as he watched me dress. No guilt. No regret. Just quiet amusement. Like he knew something I didn't. Like he knew I wasn't done. I practically ran out of the room, hands shaking as I ordered an Uber. The moment I sat down in the car, reality crashed into me. My ring was still on my finger. My husband was at home, probably sipping his morning coffee, completely unaware that his wife had just ruined everything. When I walked into our apartment, the smell of fresh brewed coffee hit me. The TV was on low. And Brian was there. He looked up from his phone, gave me a small, sleepy smile. "You're up early." I forced a laugh. "Yeah, just wanted some air." And just like that, it was a lie. A small, harmless lie. The first of many. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Amanda. "Why are you so quiet today?" I stared at the message, heart hammering. Because I had a secret too big to hide forever. And I had no idea what to do next. I spent the rest of the morning in autopilot. Brian kissed my cheek before heading out for a run. I made coffee but didn't drink it. I showered, scrubbing my skin raw, but it didn't wash away the guilt. I stared at my reflection, expecting to see a different woman, someone unrecognizable, but it was still just me. And my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. "Amanda, you okay?" "Amanda, you're being weird." "Amanda, what happened last night?" I ignored her. I couldn't talk to her. Not yet. Then another text came in. "Unknown number? Did you make it home safe?" I felt my stomach drop. Daniel. I hadn't given him my number. But then I remembered. I'd logged into my Uber account from his phone. My hands trembled as I typed back. "Me, don't text me." 3 dots appeared, then stopped. Then appeared again. "Daniel, I won't if you don't want me to." That should have been the end of it. I should have blocked him. Deleted the message. Moved on. Instead, I just stared at the screen. Because part of me wanted him to text again. By the time Brian got home, I had convinced myself I could bury this. I could compartmentalize. But I wasn't prepared for what happened next. Brian walked in, sweaty from his run, and tossed his phone on the counter. "Oh," he said, stretching. "Forgot to tell you. Mark's coming into town next week. He wants to do dinner." I blinked. "Mark?" Brian wiped his face with a towel. "Yeah, Mark from college. You remember him." My stomach twisted so hard I thought I was going to be sick. Because of course I remembered Mark. Mark was Brian's best friend from undergrad. Mark was the one who lived in New York now. Mark was the reason Brian had visited the city last year for that weekend conference. Mark was Daniel's last name. I felt my blood turn to ice. "Mark?" I forced out, my voice too tight, too thin. Brian nodded, already looking at his phone. "Yeah, I haven't seen him in years. Thought it'd be nice to catch up." "You met him once, didn't you?" "At our wedding." My ears were ringing. Daniel. Mark Daniel. He knew. He had to know. This wasn't random. This wasn't just some stranger at a bar. I felt my breathing pick up. My hands curled into fists. Daniel had played me. And I had no idea what he wanted. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, my brain filled in gaps I hadn't noticed before. The way Daniel had studied me. The way he'd asked about my marriage, not in a casual, flirty way, but like he was looking for something. The way he hadn't been surprised when I told him my name. How had I been so stupid? The next morning, I decided to text him. "Me, you knew who I was the whole time." This time, the response was immediate. "Daniel, we should talk." "Me, I have nothing to say to you." "Daniel, then listen." I clenched my jaw. I should have blocked him. Instead, I typed, "Meet me in an hour." No more games. The cafe was small, tucked away on a side street where no one I knew would see me. I got there early, but Daniel was already waiting. His expression was unreadable. No smirk, no amusement, just quiet patience. I sat down, my hands gripping the table so hard my knuckles turned white. "Say whatever you need to say, and then leave me alone." Daniel exhaled, rubbing his jaw. "I didn't plan this." I scoffed. "Bullshit." "I didn't," he repeated, voice firm. "I didn't go to O'Malley's looking for you. I didn't even know you lived in Chicago." I stayed silent. He leaned forward. "But the second I saw you, I knew who you were." I swallowed hard. "Daniel studied me. I knew your name, but I didn't know you. Not until that night." He hesitated. "And now I don't know what to do." I barked out a bitter laugh. "You don't know what to do?" "You." His jaw tightened. "I didn't expect to actually like you." I froze. I should have called him a liar again. I should have walked out. But I didn't. Because for a split second, I saw it in his eyes, something real. Something that terrified me. And for the first time since that night, I wondered if this was more dangerous than I ever realized. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to call him a liar, to storm out, to erase every second of that night from my mind. But I couldn't. Because deep down, something didn't add up. I studied him, looking for cracks in his confidence. "So you knew who I was and still, what? Decided to sleep with me just to see if you could." Daniel exhaled sharply, rubbing the back of his neck. "No, it wasn't like that." "Then explain," I snapped. He hesitated. A long, tense silence. Then he said, "I think your husband is cheating on you." My brain short-circuited. I actually laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. Are you serious? Daniel didn't flinch. Mark told me things. Months ago, when Brian visited New York. It sounded like your husband was messing around. I clenched my jaw. You're lying. Think about it, he said quietly. You said Brian's been distant. When did it start? I opened my mouth, then stopped. Because the answer was instant. After his trip to New York. A cold wave washed over me. No, it couldn't be true. Brian wasn't like that. He wasn't passionate, wasn't overly romantic, but he was good. He was steady. Reliable. He didn't lie. Did he? I shook my head, trying to push the thought away. Even if that's true, why would you sleep with me? Daniel exhaled, leaning back in his chair. Because I wanted to. And because I thought maybe you deserved to know what it felt like to be wanted again. My throat tightened. I hated him for saying it. Hated him for making it feel true. Because for the first time in years, someone had looked at me like I wasn't just part of the furniture. Someone had seen me. And now, that someone was telling me my husband might have been doing the same thing, just with someone else. I shot to my feet, chair scraping against the floor. I'm done talking to you. I turned to leave. Daniel grabbed my wrist, his grip firm but gentle. Check his phone. I yanked my arm back and walked out. But his words followed me home. Brian was in the shower when I got back. His phone sat on the nightstand. I stared at it. I had never checked his phone before. Never had a reason to. My hands shook as I picked it up. The screen lit up. No passcode. I swallowed hard and went to his messages. Nothing. Just normal conversations with coworkers, his brother, Amanda, me. I almost felt relief until I checked his emails. And there it was. A folder labeled Archives. I tapped it open. And my heart stopped. A name I didn't recognize, Samantha R. Hundreds of messages. I scrolled. And scrolled. Then I saw it. A message from 2 weeks ago. Last night was incredible. I wish I could have stayed. The air in my lungs turned to lead. I kept scrolling. Months and months of messages. Flirty at first. Then deeper. Intimate. Some from his trip to New York. Some from last weekend. Brian was having an affair. And suddenly, I couldn't breathe. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the screen. My ears were ringing. My hands felt numb. The sound of the shower stopped. Footsteps. I barely had time to put the phone down before Brian stepped into the room, towel slung over his shoulder. He ran a hand through his damp hair, looking at me. Hey, everything okay? I forced my expression to stay neutral. Yeah, I lied. His phone buzzed. A new email. From Samantha R. Brian didn't even flinch. Just grabbed his phone like it was nothing, sat on the bed, and started texting. Right in front of me. Like it was normal. Like I didn't already know. Like I wasn't sitting there, picturing all the ways I could destroy him the way he had just destroyed me. But I didn't say a word. Not yet. Because if I was going to do this, I was going to do it right. I barely slept that night. I kept replaying every moment in my head, every sign I had ignored. Brian's late nights, his phone always face down, his sudden need to go on work trips. It was all there. I had just been too blind to see it. And now, I had a choice. I could confront him. Demand an explanation. Maybe he'd lie. Maybe he'd confess. Maybe he'd beg me to stay. Or I could do something else. Something Brian would never see coming. And I knew exactly who could help me. The next morning, I sent a text. Meet me. Same place. Daniel responded immediately. Daniel, I was hoping you'd say that. I sat across from Daniel in the same cafe, but this time, I wasn't shaking. This time, I had clarity. I told him everything. The emails, the messages, the blatant disrespect of it all. I expected him to smirk, to say I told you so. But he didn't. He just listened. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, rubbing his jaw. What do you want to do? I already knew. I want him to feel it, I said, my voice steady. The betrayal. The humiliation. The consequences. Daniel nodded once, like he understood. And then we made a plan. That Friday, Brian and I were supposed to have dinner with Amanda and her husband. I suggested we host at our apartment. Made it sound casual, easy. I'll cook, I told him, kissing his cheek. We haven't done a dinner night in forever. He smiled, not even noticing the shift in me. Because he was arrogant. Because he thought I was still blind. Amanda and her husband arrived at 7, wine in hand. Brian played the perfect host, laughing, pouring drinks, completely unaware that I had invited one more guest. At 7:15, the doorbell rang. Brian frowned, setting down his beer. Expecting someone else? I smiled. Yeah, a surprise guest. I walked to the door, my heartbeat calm, steady. I opened it, and there she was. Samantha R. She looked exactly how I pictured her. Early 30s, polished, blonde, wearing one of those too perfect smiles. Her gaze darted to me, then past me, toward him. Brian's entire body locked up. Amanda looked between us, confused. Who's this? I stepped aside and let Samantha in. This, I said smoothly, is Brian's girlfriend. The room froze. The color drained from Brian's face. What the hell? Samantha's brows furrowed. Wait, what's going on? She looked at Brian. You said you were divorced. Silence. I felt nothing as Brian turned to me, desperation creeping into his eyes. Baby, this isn't. Oh, don't, I interrupted, voice sharp. Just don't. Samantha let out a choke sound. You're married? Brian had no response. No words. Amanda's mouth was hanging open. Are you kidding me? She hissed, standing so fast her chair scraped the floor. She turned on Brian. You cheated? He ran a hand down his face, pacing. I can explain. I tilted my head, arms crossed. Then explain. Everyone watched him. His mouth opened, closed, and for the first time, Brian had no words. Samantha scoffed, shaking her head in disgust. You son of a bitch. She stormed toward the door, stopping only to look at me. I didn't know. If I had, she exhaled sharply. I'm sorry. I believed her. She left. Silence hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Then Brian turned to me. You set me up? I arched a brow. I gave you a chance to tell me the truth. You didn't. His face twisted, anger bubbling under the surface. Oh, don't act like you're innocent. Amanda frowned. What the hell does that mean? Brian's gaze burned into mine. Tell them, he spat. Tell them what you did. I held his stare. You first. His lip curled. You cheated, too. Amanda flinched. Her husband blinked. Daniel had been right. Brian didn't love me anymore, because if he did, this would have hurt him. Instead, he looked angry that I had taken away his power. I did, I said calmly. One night. One time. And the second I woke up, I felt sick. Because I still thought our marriage meant something. I took a step closer. But you? You did it over and over and over. You lied, you planned, you covered it up. So don't you dare act like we're the same. Amanda inhaled sharply, realization hitting her. Oh my God, she whispered. That's why you've been so quiet. Brian let out a humorless laugh. So what now? He said, voice dripping with bitterness. You planning to divorce me? And just like that, I saw it. The real him. The selfish, manipulative, cowardly man who never thought he'd get caught. I had spent years making excuses for him, telling myself our love was just changing, not dying. But I wasn't making excuses anymore. I looked him in the eye and said, yes. And for the first time all night, Brian looked genuinely shocked. Like he never actually thought I'd go through with it. I turned to Amanda. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. She gave me a sad, understanding smile. I get it. And I knew she did. I exhaled, turning back to Brian. I'll be staying at Amanda's for now. I'll have a lawyer contact you. Then I walked to the door. Brian didn't stop me. Because he knew he couldn't. The first night at Amanda's, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. For the first time in years, I was alone. And for the first time in years, I felt free. Daniel texted me a few days later. Daniel, how are you holding up? Me, honestly? Better than I thought I would be. Daniel, good. A pause. Then, Daniel, do you regret it? I thought about that for a long time. Did I regret cheating? Yes. Did I regret leaving Brian? No. Me, I regret letting myself be blind for so long. Daniel, I get that. I hesitated. Then, before I could overthink it, I typed me. So what happens now? His response came almost instantly. Daniel, that depends. What do you want to happen? I stared at the message. And for the first time in a long, long time, I smiled.